Yo, what's good, Shinobi Nation? Welcome back to Just a Shinobi, the home of the craziest Naruto what-ifs. Today we're jumping into part 4 of What If Yajuu Sanin Trained Neglected Naruto. So strap in, because things are about to get explosive. If you're new to the channel, make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter, and share this video with your whole ninja squad. And of course, drop your theories in the comments. Your support is what keeps this shinobi grinding. Chapter 12, Trial by Fire, Part 2. Perhaps taunting the emotionally unstable enemy ninja hadn't been her best idea. Hinata weaved from side to side as she backpedaled away from the barrage of metal talons that whipped through the air, inches from her face. She ducked to the side of the branch and pumped chakra into her feet, which jettisoned her away as the crazed nun slammed his mace through the space she had just occupied, sending wooden splinters flying. I'm getting nowhere like this. She twisted midair and pulled out a kunai to deflect the barrage of metal spikes speeding towards her. She landed on a branch and quickly ducked behind the truck as a new barrage of needles peppered the bark. She pressed her back against the tree and tried to catch her breath. Her could see the outline of his chakra clearly through the wood. She needed a plan. Her eyes widened and she ducked down as metallic claws sliced through the trunk of the tree right where her head had been. She twisted under the branch again and launched herself towards the ground. She needed time to think. As she fell, she pulled out a handful of shuriken and flung them at the crazed enemy. His mace arm contorted into a rectangular shield, which the projectiles bounced off with a metallic clang. She panted and fell to one knee as she landed on the ground. All of this evading was going to tire her out, plus he was faster than her. Sooner or later he was going to catch up with her. There was also another problem. With the almost 360 degrees field of vision granted by she could also see the other IWA Nin behind her in the trees. The longer she took fighting this man, the harder it would be to take down his teammate. She was shook out of her thoughts as the crazed man screamed at her. I asked you before, so start talking before I have to take a limb. Tell me about the blonde brat. Silence and an angry glare was his only response. Fine, he said as his arm shifted from a large mace into an axe head. Dismemberment it is. She ignored him. Instead, she was focusing on his chakra network as his arm changed shape. The in his arm was working overtime. He must have to keep pumping chakra through his arms to maintain that shape. He was also in a war of attrition. Although his reserves were larger, they were depleting much faster than hers. Even so, this would still not be enough for her to outlast him. No doubt he would recognize if he needed to conserve chakra, and his teammate would certainly jump in if it got too hectic for him. There was something else that was on her mind. If his body was covered in metal, what was the shield for? Was there a limit or a weak spot in his armor? Time to run some tests. By now, the IWA was nearly upon her, deciding to jump down straight at her rather than running down the tree. As he drew closer, she reached into her bag and threw down 2 smoke grenades. Takara coughed and whipped around as the clouds of purple smoke consumed him. He squeezed his eyes as his vision was completely blurred. All the while, a pair of white eyes gazed at him through the smoke. She circled the man and started a barrage of shuriken as she ran. A stray shuriken bounced off of his head and chest with a clang. He growled and yelled, "Stop it, you irritating bitch!" before raising his shield to block the rain of sharp metal. There it was. If it had no effect, why did he need the shield? She noted the shape of the shield. The top of it stopped just below his neck and it reached down to the ground. Was there a weak spot lower? Then she saw it. She hadn't noticed it earlier as he chased her, but now it stuck out like a sore thumb. The in his arms and chest were well above average size. However, the in his legs were disproportionately small. They were about the size you would find in a toddler. As it turned out, Takara hailed from the Zaofu clan. They had been blessed with the particular ability to restructure the composition of their body into steel. With this useful Genkai, their bodies were all the weapons they ever needed. They could configure their body into any shape as long as they had the chakra reserves to maintain it. They had been one of Iwa's most respected clans, until the Yondaime Hokage discovered 2 fatal flaws in their clan's jutsu, and spread these weaknesses throughout the Land of Fire. One of these flaws was that while the in their upper body grew at an abnormal rate, the ones in their lower body left much to be desired. As a result, they had difficulty transferring the effects of their jutsu towards their legs, especially around the ankles. They were the living embodiment of Achilles' heel. Hinata's eyes gleamed as she gripped her kunai. Kakashi raced after the unknown assailant. He was not about to let the Uchiha clan's last hope get away. He finally got within range of the man and sunshined ahead of his path. He intercepted the unknown assailant midair and drove a kunai straight through his eye and out the back of his skull. The man crumpled into the knife and Kakashi's eye widened as he recognized the headband. IWA. What could they possibly be doing this deep in fire country? Before he could remove his knife, the man's face sagged before turning into a giant pile of mud. Mud clone, he muttered. Kakashi was instantly alert. He reached to pick up the limp boy, but realized something wasn't right. He was too heavy. After he noticed the buzzing feeling in the back of his head, he finally recognized the genjutsu. Release. Instantly the illusion lifted, revealing a dead worker from the lumberyard. Kakashi could only stare at the body in shock, and then it hit him. He had been tricked. The IWA Jounin played him. He had set a simple trap and successfully lured him away from the others. Kakashi unceremoniously dropped the dead body, and started speeding back towards the complex, doubling the amount of chakra in his legs. No doubt the others were in the thick of things. There was no way they were prepared for a Jounin. He could only hope that Naruto understood the severity of his weakened state, and decided to stay out of the action for once. For if they recognized him... He shuddered as he darted back towards his students. Takara was irritated. He began firing spikes randomly from his hand into the smoke. He needed to get out of this. As he started to move, he heard a noise to his right as a barrage of shuriken and kunai flew towards him. He raised his arm and blocked most of the assault. It wasn't until he heard a hiss at his feet that he started to get worried. He morphed his arms into flat boards and slammed them in front of him as the explosions started going off. He struggled against the concussive force of the exploding tags when he sensed something behind him. He was only fast enough to see the Hyuga girl appear out of the smoke with kunai in hand. She quickly stabbed one into his heel and another into his thigh, right through one of his. He roared in pain and whipped the shield around, trying to knock the girl back, but she managed to leap out of the way. The moment she landed, she was quickly sprinting back towards him. His arm began to contort, but she brushed it out of the way with her glowing palms as she got inside of his guard. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, the man realized how much danger he was actually in. In the split second before her attack, he formed a small amount of chakra in his chest. He hoped it would be enough. 8 trigrams 64 palm guard. While it had guard in the title, the offensive capabilities of this attack were staggering. Concentrated blades of chakra raced across his body in parabolas as he was literally cut to pieces. His metal body was sturdy, but this was finesse at its finest, carving its way through his armor and out his back. Simply put, the jutsu sliced through him like paper. As the blue net of chakra disappeared, Hinata backed away and panted. That had eaten up over a third of her chakra. This was the first jutsu she had ever created, and she was very proud of it. She had thought of the idea after going through some of her mother's notes. Her mother had her develop her own technique that involved forming chakra into a sharp blade, but the chakra control needed for it was currently out of Hinata's league. Instead, she had chosen to take the basic principle and try to use it to duplicate a technique she did not have mastered yet, the Kaiten. The result was a technique that could be spread out all around her for defense, or focused in front of her for offense. As she gazed upon her work, she felt as though she was going to be sick. It was like a mannequin had been attacked by a samurai. What was left of the man knelt on his knees and his body was splayed apart. Thankfully, the inside of his body visible from the cuts did not show any blood or organs. Instead, it looked as if someone had made a smooth, clean cut through a block of metal. With a sigh of relief, she started to turn towards the man's comrade when the bundle of metal and flesh shuddered. Her eyes were as wide as saucers as her head whipped back to the body as the open cuts began melding back together. Just how durable was he? She reached into her bag for an explosive tag to finish it when a barrage of kunai flew at her from the trees. She jumped back as Kyo landed between her and his teammate. She scowled as she noted the red chakra burns on his hands. He had been trying to force his open, but apparently to little avail. He sighed as he reached into his pouch and pulled out a large red pill. He stuck it in his mouth and bit down. Hinata was shocked as his chakra system raged violently. It hadn't been a soldier pill, but it seemed to be having a similar effect. She was even more surprised as the pressure in his hands finally burst and his were forced open. Opening his open that forcefully was sure to leave major lacerations to his chakra network. Unless he was treated immediately, he was going to suffer from severe trauma to his hands for years. While this thought raced through his mind, he momentarily ignored it, for he had accomplished his goal. He could mold chakra again. He grit his teeth through the agonizing pain as he began forming hand signs. She quickly flung her kunai as he slammed his hands into the ground. Doton, Earth-style wall. Rock and dirt erupted from the ground, blocking the kunai, and sheltered the IWA shinobi from the ensuing explosion. After it died down, Q jumped onto the wall and looked down at the Hinata. Although his eyes were full of great pain, they also held an apologetic look. While I don't agree with his behavior towards you, I cannot sit idly by and allow you to kill my friend. She ignored him as she stared through the wall at the figure behind it. His chakra was greatly diminished, but the man was getting back up. She took a step back as a metallic claw gripped the side of the rock wall. As he looked around the wall, his face was full of rage as he stared at the tiny girl in front of him. You are going to regret that, he said with a voice far too calm to match his face. She was so focused on him that she did not notice the other man speeding through hand signs. Doton, stone binding. His words broke Hinata out of her trance, but she was too slow to react when the earth beneath her shot up and clamped down on her legs. Hold her still, Q, Takara growled. He raised his arm and it shot forward towards the girl, too quick for her to see. She raised her hands as if to somehow block the attack, when a windmill shuriken cleanly cut through the arm. Takara screamed in pain as two shadows landed in front of her. I thought you were the one who stressed how important Kakashi's teamwork lessons were? You shouldn't have gone off by yourself, Hinata. Be nice. You're just jealous you weren't the one to get to fight by yourself. You did amazing, Hinata-chan. You tore that guy apart. She let out a sigh of relief at the sight of the two boys in front of her. Sasuke stared down the two IWA as Naruto began helping the girl out of the constraints around her legs. Sasuke and I arrived just in time to see you slice up that bastard. That was awesome. She nodded her head as he helped her to her feet. As she studied his face, she was shocked by how tired he seemed. He had to be at the tipping point. He was facing so much fatigue that he was only standing up through sheer willpower. Sasuke shot her a glance over his shoulder. Hinata, you did a good job. Let me take care of the metal freak, while you and the dove take care of the other. She started to protest, but he shot her a look. I am completely fresh and have full reserves of chakra. You, on the other hand, do not. Make sure the idiot doesn't trip over his own feet, and take out that other nin. She couldn't argue with his logic and stood on her feet. His weakness is in his legs. His shape-shifting ability has extreme difficulty covering them. He nodded as all three of them stared at their opponents. Takara's mind went blank by the sudden arrival of the two boys. He had only assumed so when he had overheard Daiki's speech earlier, but a part of him didn't really believe it. But now, as he stood across from the boy, there was no doubt about it. That hair color. That shape. His apparent skill in it all added up. You. He hung his head and started to shake as everyone turned their attention to him. His face shot up as he glared at Naruto. You bastard! The man sprung forward, batting the other two aside, as he lunged for the boy. It took everything he had to duck below the blow, and he began racing away from the crazed nin. I'm going to kill you! Sasuke raced after the two as they worked their way further into the woods. Q began to move after them, but he was blocked by the kunoichi. Your battle is with me, Q-san. He frowned as he began forming hand signs. Earlier, Sasuke had been standing at Kakashi's designated point for over 20 minutes. He didn't know what could possibly be holding the man, but the whole atmosphere of the night was getting on his nerves. He left the central area and started his way back towards the campsite. As he passed by the administration building, he was surprised to find Kenta hovering over Naruto a couple feet away from a pile of glass. He ran up to them as he assessed the scene. "What happened here?" The old man was distraught. "I caught some ruffian rifling through our business records. To make matters worse, he dashed off with the entire shipment that Naruto boy sealed up today. Little Hinata-chan raced after him about 15 minutes ago." "What?" he asked incredulously before turning his attention to the blonde. "You let her go off on her own?" "I can't go anywhere, Sasuke. She was the only one around, and the guy was getting away. Besides, she can take care of herself." Sasuke didn't doubt his teammate's abilities, but one should never run off without knowing the enemy's strength and numbers. For all they knew, she could have been lured into a trap. "Why haven't you taken a soldier pill and gone after her?" "I would have already if I had any. Kakashi-sensei made sure Hinata-chan took them all away from me in case I tried to eat one to stay awake," Naruto grumbled, clearly frustrated by his own state of helplessness. Sasuke shook his head and reached into his bag, before handing a small pill to his blonde teammate. The blonde appreciated the gesture and gladly swallowed the horribly tasting pill. Energy surged through his system as he stood up. He was by no means at 100%, but at least he could move without others helping him. "Lead the way." With that, the two boys left Kenta in the dust as they raced after their teammate. He could only pray that she didn't need them, but if she did, he hoped they made it in time. Present. Naruto cursed as another cut grazed his chest as he backpedaled away from the crazy shinobi. If he had been freshly rested, the boy would have easily outsped the IWA, but as it was, he was barely even staying alive. He jumped back again as the man raced towards him with renewed vigor. He took 5 steps before Sasuke Uchiha planted his feet in the man's face, slapped on a piece of paper, and kicked off before a tiny explosion sent the man flying back. Naruto rested his hands on his knees, grateful for the chance to regain his strength. "Nice job, theme. So what's the plan?" Sasuke shot him a surprised and smug look. "Are you actually letting me lead voluntarily?" "It may be the exhaustion talking, but I'll admit that you're a bit smarter than I am. Right now, I'm so tired I can barely think straight. So use that supposed prodigal brain of yours to think of a way to stop this homicidal bastard." Sasuke suppressed a grin as he stared at the IWA shinobi, who was starting to get back up. His mind raced with possibilities. From what Hinata said, he could only assume that shuriken and kunai would not work on this guy. Even in his current state, he was going to be more wary of his legs after what Hinata did to him. He also had to worry about the dove. He didn't know why the IWA Nin hated him so much, but he had his eyes set on tearing him apart. It was going to be difficult finding an opportunity to get at his legs, while protecting the blonde. As the man's face shifted from a metallic sheen back to his normal skin color, a thought raced through his mind. "Naruto, do you still have any of those storage seals you made from earlier?" "Yeah, I guess." "Why?" "How long would it take for you to alter the design of the seal?" Naruto's face lit up, as he understood. "Oh, I got it. Normally a minute or 2, but in my current state, I'd need about 5 minutes. Keep him off me, while I make the preparations. Take this." Sasuke nodded and stuck the piece of paper handed to him in his pouch as the IWA Nin started racing towards them. If the dove needed 5 minutes, he was going to get it. Hinata twisted as she dodged another spike from the ground as she raced towards her opponent. With every jutsu he cast, his hands were becoming more and more damaged from chakra burns. He growled as another flash of pain burst through his system and he pushed through more seals. Katon Flame Salvo! He lifted his head as multiple fireballs shot through the air and raced towards the girl. She twisted and dodged her way around them as she raced toward the wall. The man back-flipped off the wall, forming more seals before he shouted, "Doton, Mobile Core!" He stretched his hands out as the wall of rock shot forward at alarming speeds. Hinata stuck to her path as the rock flew forwards and slid underneath it at the last second. Keeping her stride, she leapt back up to her feet and raced towards the man as she pulled out a kunai. Even though she's not as cold as the Hyuga I've heard about, she's just as lethal, Kyo thought as he pulled out his own kunai and raced towards her. Sasuke stared back at his reflection across the metal sheen of the man's arms as sparks flew past his face. He held 2 kunai within his grasp as he and the metal man traded blows. If he had been in his normal mental state, the man probably could have overpowered the boy, but he was in a state of rage and was flailing wildly. He was also still injured from his previous bout with the Hyuga. His ankle was still throbbing as he worked his way past the pain. As they clashed once again, he used his superior strength to fling the Uchiha back. The boy flipped in their air before landing gracefully on his feet. "Stop getting in my way, Uchiha. You can't stop me from getting the Yandame brat." Sasuke shook his head. "I don't know what you're talking about, but I can't let you murder my teammate. Even if it would save me some headaches in the future." The man growled as his eyes scanned the canopy. The boy couldn't have gone too far. It had only been a matter of minutes. Although he wasn't a sensor, he could still feel the boy's chakra in the area. The boy's reserves were so potent that it was like sending a flare in the air. Even those with basic sensor training could pick him up. As his eyes combed the area, he noticed the Uchiha eye a certain tree off to the side. Whipping his head in that direction, he finally saw the brat sitting on a tree working on a scroll. Sasuke cursed as Takara lunged at the blonde. "No! No out of you!" Naruto was startled and jumped away from the branch as the man landed, kicking up a cloud of splinters. The boy hastily began forming the finishing touches as he dashed away from the man. Sasuke was in quick pursuit, and he noticed they were heading back towards Hinata. If the 2 IWA Nins were able to regroup, it would be harder for them to execute their plan. "Hurry up, you dumbass," he thought. Hinata and Q were furiously exchanging blows when the blonde boy and his pursuers burst into view. And... "Got it! I got it! It's ready! Did you plant it, Sasuke? It's done! Hurry up and do it!" Naruto formed his hands in a seal and yelled "Activate!" Instantly, Takara felt himself dead drop from his mid-air jump and slammed into the ground. He growled as he struggled against the invisible weight that seemed to keep him pressed against the ground. When the hell had they planted a seal on him? He froze as he remembered his exchange with the Uchiha. He must have planted it then. But when could he have done it? "What the hell have you done to me?" Ignoring him, the 2 boys landed next to the crater and began vigorously going through hand signs. Panic spread across Takara's face when they both landed on the Tora sign. They took in a deep breath of air before yelling to the sky. "Katon Fireball Jutsu! Katon Fox Hellfire!" The 2 boys let loose on the IWA Nin as he was enveloped in a raging inferno. The area erupted with light, and the roar of the flames quickly overshadowed the screams of agony. His flesh would have been seared away by the immense heat, but he quickly covered his entire body to metal. As the flame raged on, he began melting into a silver puddle. Even as he melted down into a liquid form, his consciousness was still aware of what was going on. Oh, he was going to slaughter them after he reformed. He was going to get his hands on every last Konoha shinobi. Yudasama would make sure that their stupid village was burned to the ground. His thoughts of rage quickly changed to fear as the blonde cut off his jutsu and spread open the scroll in his hands. He faced the open page towards the crater and yelled, "Seal!" Immediately, the liquid sprung up towards the seal and the man screamed as he was forcibly sucked inside. After 10 seconds of blistering heat raking the boy's fingers, the liquid in the crater was gone, and a kanji symbol for steel suddenly appeared on the page. Sealing a human being away may have been too complicated due to all of the elements that made up the human body, but he sure as hell could seal away a simple alloy. This distraction was all Hinata needed as she snuck her way into the man's guard. "You are within range of my divination," she said calmly. The man's eyes shot open as her fingers danced across his body, forcefully closing his. 8 trigrams 32 palms. She shouted as she delivered the final blow. The man slumped over onto his face as the girl fell to her knees. She panted and grinned at the boys standing above the steaming crater. They had done it. They had actually done it. Q was distraught. The plan was a bust. While they certainly would draw attention from their mole, they were now at risk of jeopardizing the mission. If they were captured and brought before a Yamanaka, it would all be for nothing. Fighting back tears and working through the blinding pain, he reached into his pocket and grasped a handful of explosive tags. "I'm sorry," Hyuga-san coughed as he glanced towards her. Her eyes widened as a roar of flame engulfed the two of them. Naruto had about 3.84 seconds to respond. The moment he saw Hinata's opponent reach into his bag, he was sprinting towards them. He pushed past his exhaustion as he forced his legs to go beyond their limits. He would save her. He had to save her. His muscles strained as he forced them to move, and he scooped up the girl right as the explosion went off. Sasuke could only watch in horror as the ball of flame engulfed his teammates. Not again. He couldn't be left alone again. In a heartbeat, the blonde appeared in front of him in a flash of yellow light. Sasuke stumbled back in shock, not noticing the tri-pronged kunai that lay at his feet. Hinata stared up at the blonde in awe. One moment, she was sure she was staring into her own death. The next thing she knew, she was overcome by the strangest sensation she had ever felt, and now she was staring up at the silhouetted face of her crush. It was a moment she would never forget. His face was perfectly lit up by the explosion behind him as concern was etched across his face. He tentatively held her in his arms as he clutched her to his chest. It was perfect. Until the blonde's cheeks began to bulge and he regurgitated Kenta's special meal for him all over Hinata's lap. And just like that, the moment was gone. Daiki could not believe the carnage he saw before him. That idiot Takara had gotten himself sealed and Kyo had been beaten by a single genin. He had led Kakashi on a wild goose chase with a disguised worker from the yard, before sending a clone off to keep him distracted. He had been surprised when he arrived to find no one at the rendezvous point. He hadn't been exactly worried for his companions, but they only had so much time before Kakashi would figure out his ruse. As he stumbled into their battleground, the sight that met him had floored him. He could barely believe his eyes. There was no mistaking that jutsu. The blonde had performed the Hiraishin. Suddenly everything fell into place. His hair. His skill in. He could not allow this boy to live. It would be disastrous for IWA. He raced towards the boy, who had dropped his female teammate as he tried to steady himself. The Uchiha noticed him and shouted at his teammates, while trying to cut the jounin off. There was a big difference between a and a jounin, and Daiki demonstrated this as he easily slipped past the boy's defenses, rammed a kunai into his shoulder, and knocked the wind out of him as he shoved him out of the way. He raced towards the blonde, kunai in hand, as the boy stumbled to stay upright. He was a foot away from the boy with his kunai reared back to stab, when he was jolted to a halt and a cold feeling burst through his own chest. He violently shuddered as he slowly looked down to see a hand coated in dancing lightning protruding through his heart. Blood trailed from his mouth, and he turned around just long enough to stare into a single red eye before the world turned dark around him. Chapter 13, Downtime, Part 1. Team 7 stood quietly as Kakashi finished his report. They shifted uncomfortably under the Hokage's steady gaze, as the sunset behind the man silhouetted the man's intimidating profile. The Hokage wanted to sigh as he stared at the genin before him. It was too late in the day for this. He just couldn't seem to catch a break. It had barely been 2 months since they graduated, and they were already causing him headaches. Only Team 7 could turn a simple D-rank mission into an A-rank and spark an international incident. Of course, IWA was in the wrong here, and they knew it. He was going to make sure that they felt pressure for their actions. He was confident that the Fire Daimyo would have some choice words for the Earth Daimyo, when he found out someone had been actively trying to sabotage his business. Thankfully, they had all returned from their first encounter with an enemy ninja relatively unharmed. Apart from a few cuts and bruises, they weren't much worse for wear. The day after the battle, Hinata had been sure to treat Sasuke's stab wound to ensure it didn't get infected, and Naruto took the time to work off his exhaustion as he slept for 14 hours. While this prevented them from leaving, Kenta was very accommodating. They had originally planned to head back to the village 3 or 4 days after their arrival anyway. Since they had finished early and successfully retrieved the stolen items, he was more than happy to wait a day or two before they all headed back. "Thank you for your report, Kakashi." He gazed over the genin and reassured them with a smile. I must say that I am very impressed with all of you. Each of you should be commended for your contributions to the success of the mission. It speaks highly of your ability to keep a level head in that kind of situation and work as a team. Especially you, Hinata-chan. Not many genin can hold off two alone and actually come close to disabling both of them. You should be proud. The girl tried to shrink into her jacket as her face lit up from such praise. Naruto smiled and patted her on the back, while Sasuke smirked at her reaction. That is not to say that I'm not impressed with you boys either. Kenta had nothing but praise for you, Naruto, and he was anxious to find out when he could get you back. You continue to impress with your abilities and keep up the good work. Naruto also began to blush as he rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Sasuke, I'm also very pleased by your performance. You were able to stay calm and form a plan that utilized the strengths of your teammates and yourself. It speaks a lot of your ability as a leader. Well done. Even if he didn't show it, Sasuke was secretly pleased from the praise. I'd say Team 7 has earned a few days off. I'll leave the details to Kakashi, but make sure to take some time to recuperate after your endeavors. Sasuke, make sure to stop by the hospital before you head home. I'm confident that Hinata was able to patch you up just fine, but I'd still prefer it if you went and saw professional help. You are all dismissed. They bowed and turned to Kakashi, who gave them a wave. Meet me back at the training grounds in 3 days, and make sure to be on time. Try not to strain yourselves in the meantime. Now take a long rest. You've earned it. The three of them nodded and bid their farewell to the Hokage before shuffling out the door. Kakashi turned back to the Sandaime as the atmosphere became more serious. He reached into his bag and pulled out a green scroll, which he handed to the Hokage. I take it this contains the Chunin from the Zaofu clan? The Hokage asked as he inspected the scroll. Kakashi nodded. It was a very clever idea. When sealing away something, the structure of the seal had to be prepared for that specific item. Kunai, shuriken, and other weaponry were easy enough because they consisted mostly of iron. The fewer elements present in the object one hoped to seal, the less complicated the formula had to be. However, a human body was so diverse and difficult to measure that it was almost impossible to seal away a living person. The boys had forced the Iwa Nin into his metal form, which greatly reduced the amount of elements present in his body, making it simple for Naruto to restructure the sealing scroll. What are you planning to do with him? He asked out of curiosity. Sandaime waved his hand and an Anbu suddenly appeared next to him. Please make sure that this is delivered to Ibiki, and tell him to wait for further instructions. Hi Hokage-sama, she nodded and shined out of the room. I haven't decided yet. We first have to see if he actually survived the sealing process. In his metallic state, his consciousness may have been able to withstand the effects of the transition. If he survived, I'm going to let Ibiki handle his interrogation. After we are sure we have gotten everything we can from him, I may use him as a bartering chip if Anoki decides to be difficult. Though, I don't suspect there will be too much trouble from his end of discussions. He's facing enough problems as it is. While things were certainly peaceful in the Land of Fire, the same could not be said for the rest of the world. In all honesty, Kumo was the only truly stable hidden village at the moment. While Konoha wasn't facing any major problems, even now, they were still recovering from the backlash of the Kyuubi attack and the Uchiha massacre. Suna was currently facing some economic problems. Then again, due to their topography, they would never truly be as successful as their neighboring countries. While Iowa's economy was stable due to their bountiful mining industry, they were facing some social unrest within the ranks of their shinobi. What's the word from Iwa? Kakashi asked. According to Jiraiya's network, Anoki is facing some dissent amongst his ranks. He still holds the support of the majority of the shinobi in his forces, but the numbers of those who favor the ideals of his opponent are not to be dismissed out of hand. How familiar are you with Yuta Tsubasa? The name sounds familiar, but all I can remember is that he's on their council. He is certainly someone to keep an eye on. While Anoki may harbor a grudge towards us for their loss in the last war, he at least has a modicum of respect for us. He would never strike back for something as petty as revenge. Yuta Tsubasa, on the other hand, does not share his peers' perspective. He is rather vocal about his displeasure towards us. If he is causing trouble, why doesn't the Tsuchikage deal with him? For the same reason I still allowed Danzo to continue that secret organization of his. At the moment, Yuta's services for the village do more good than harm. Besides, he is far too clever to oppose the Tsuchikage directly. The old buzzard would never publicly stand against his orders. He rebels against him in more subtle ways, such as through his public speeches. He mostly targets those who lost family in the last war, but he is trying to widen his umbrella of influence. Sounds to me that Yuta would be happier to get the Zaofu back than the Tsuchikage would. Indeed. In any case, if we do send him back, we will have to have a Yamanaka wipe his mind of particular events. Kakashi knew the conversation would be heading in this direction. From your report, both he and the Jounin seemed to recognize the boy immediately. Well, Naruto wasn't exactly being very subtle about it, Kakashi said as he scratched his head. The Jounin only recognized him because he saw him use the Hiraishin to save Hinata. Even so, the resemblance is uncanny. Honestly, I never understand how no one in our village ever makes the connection. It shocks me as well, but ignorance tends to blind those with a heavy heart, the Hokage commented. Although everything managed to work out this time, I am concerned of what could happen in the future. It is only going to get more difficult for you to watch over all three of them. They need to be ready for the challenges I'm certain are heading their way. I was thinking just the same thing, sir. In fact, I have a request. After several minutes, the Sandaime rolled around Kakashi's proposal in his head. Any drawbacks he could think of were quite light when compared to the possible benefits. It was just a matter of bending protocol. If I were to agree to this, I have terms of my own that you would have to submit to. Before I tell you them, I have to be sure. Would you be fully committed to this? Absolutely, sir. The events of the mission must have shaken the man more than he had thought. The Hokage pulled out his pipe and lit it with his finger. He took a few puffs before he returned his gaze to the Jounin. All right. I will allow it. On these terms. For once, the sight of the Hyuga compound brought a smile to her face. She couldn't believe she'd only been gone for a few days. Hinata was looking forward to a nice, hot shower before heading to sleep. She was broken out of her daydream when she realized her father would be expecting her to report to him as soon as she got home. Her mood quickly dimmed as she took her time shuffling towards his office. She still hadn't made up her mind about how she was going to bring up her issue to him. Assuming her plan of writing down the story on a different scroll worked, it was certain that he would want to know where it came from, bringing her right back to where she started. How could she tell him without lying? She was so preoccupied by her internal debate that she did not realize she had been standing outside his office for several minutes. Hinata, I know you are there. Please come in, her father's voice rang behind the door. Shaking off her stupor, she slid open the door and entered. Her father sat at his desk like he had every day with that same stern look on his face. I take it your short mission was a success. Yes, sir, although we did run into some complications. He merely raised an eyebrow as he waited for her to continue. What could have possibly been so bad on a D-rank mission? Hayashi already knew of the C-rank curse that seemed to plague every iteration of Team 7, but he wasn't expecting it to happen so soon. They hadn't even been assigned a C-rank yet. We encountered 3 IWA shinobi who were trying to steal shipping and financial information from the lumberyard. My team and I were forced to intervene and subdue them. Hayashi frowned as he gave her his undivided attention. Start from the beginning. Hayashi closed his eyes as he digested the information. It was worrying to hear that IWA would be daring enough to venture this deep into Fire Nation territory. I am very pleased with your performance. Your ability to hold off and subdue 2 IWA Chunin speaks highly of yourself and of the clan. Make sure to continue your efforts. Of course, father, she replied, bowing her head. Now, it is getting late. Head off to bed. I am still curious about this new technique you have claimed to develop and wish for a demonstration tomorrow. For now, you are dismissed. He turned back to his lingering paperwork, but was surprised when she didn't move. She seemed nervous and twiddled her thumbs together. Is there something else you wish to discuss? Actually, there is, she muttered. He gave her time to compose herself and gather her thoughts. She steeled herself as she said, there is something I would like to share with you regarding the Hyuga clan ring. Hayashi was instantly alert. Due to Shikaku's suggestion, he had been preparing to have a talk with his daughter after she returned, but he was not expecting it to happen so soon. He was surprised she was the first one to make a move. Go on. I believe I have discovered a story that might pertain to the stone ring. Where did this story come from, if I may ask? She bit her lip and seemed to be having a fierce internal debate. It came from the stone room. It wasn't a complete lie. She had received the scroll in the room, just not from translating the stone. She was slightly relieved when she looked into her father's eyes and saw they were as sharp as they ever were. Her plan seemed to be working so far. When did this happen? About when I was assigned to Team 7. His eyes flashed. Why did you not bring this to my attention sooner? I just wanted to make you proud by figuring it out by myself. Hayashi was torn. The leader side of him was furious that she would keep something so important from him, and the father side of him was melting by her need to please him. It was just who she was. But there was something else. She was hiding something. Normally, he would chalk Hinata's nervous behavior to her shy personality, but he had been trained to notice when someone was holding something back. His own sensei had been a master at gathering information, and he had been sure to pass along his teachings to his students. The way she avoided eye contact more than normal. The way she hunched her shoulders. How she paused to think out her answer. They were all signs that she wasn't giving him the full truth. She was twisting it into a more believable story. As much as it vexed him, he would have to play along. He was simply grateful she had finally decided to come to him with this on her own. There were unknown factors at play here, and it was dangerous for her to undertake this on her own. Why are you bringing this to my attention now? Because I need help. I've been hitting dead ends, and I believe it is time that I started reaching out to others. I can no longer do this alone. A smile fought to escape his lips. While I am displeased that you kept this from me, I am proud that you came to me on your own accord. It speaks highly of one's character when they can admit that they cannot do everything by themselves. She blushed as she nodded her head. Now, what discoveries have you made this time? It felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. I have discovered a story which could possibly point to the origin of the clan, but it seems to be just a fable. Most origin stories seem that way. Although the origin of Konoha can be traced back about 100 years, the battle between the village's founders is already revered as legend. As I have told you, our clan's history is one coated in prestige, but even we don't know the full origins of where our clan originated. I am very interested to hear this fable of yours. If you will permit me, I can get you a full translation of the story and a copy of my research tomorrow morning. I accept your proposal. I will make sure to clean up my schedule. Meet me back here at 9 o'clock with all the research you have accumulated, and we shall discuss your findings. Thank you, Father, she bowed as she began to stand up. She made her way to the door, when he called out to her. Hinata. She paused at the door to turn back to him. I am very pleased with your progress. Your mother would be very proud of the young woman you are becoming. Hinata's face lit up in a big smile, as her heart skipped a beat. She stuttered out a thank you as she rushed to her room to get ready. After she was gone, Hayashi unclenched the scroll he held in his hand. He had prepared it in case the mysterious genjutsu seemed to return again. She seemed to understand that there was something wrong as well. She was lying about where she got this story, but that did not mean he could dismiss it. She was trying to work around the illusion problem as well, he realized. As much as it pained him, she would have to face the bulk of this problem on her own. All he could do was try to lighten her load. Naruto had passed out the moment his head hit his pillow. He hadn't even bothered changing out of his torn and bloody new clothes. When he woke up the next morning, he was disappointed when he took off his new hoodie. The navy shirt was fine. It just needed a wash, but the short-sleeve hood was torn across the front. He would have to spend some time knitting that back together. While it still seemed like a girly skill to him, he had been forced to learn it early on. With his limited budget, he was forced to repair the limited amount of clothes he had. He left a shadow clone to deal with this, as he pulled his casual white shirt over his head. He had 3 days all to himself, and he was going to make the most of it. He really wanted to dig into his new Advanced Series books, but there was one thing he had to take care of. He said his goodbyes to the clone working in his house as he set out for the Hokage's office. It was time for his second major test. Even at these early hours, Sandaime was already fiercely at work. He sat across from Shikaku and Danzo as they scrolled over the mission report from the night before. "What are your thoughts on this?" he asked. Shikaku shook his head. "Something doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense for them to sneak this far into our territory just to steal some business documents. That company has several branches that make more ideal targets closer to Iowa's borders." The Hokage nodded. This had troubled him as well. "What also bothers me is the behavior of the two." Sandaime shot a look at his old friend who had been silent the entire time. "And what are your thoughts on this?" Danzo was quiet before he opened his eyes. "Let's examine the behavior of the members of their unit. First, the Zaofu clansman. I believe his actions are not an indication of Iwa's overarching mission. He poorly acted out of anger and threatened the safety of his teammates, just to settle a petty score. What we should focus on is what reactions he elicited from his comrades. From Hyuga-sama's report, the other seemed surprised when Zaofu arrived. It begs the question why he would be surprised by support after Hinata-sama had relinquished his possession of his supposed target and removed his ability to utilize ninjutsu. You're suggesting that they had another objective? Perhaps. I will admit. I am surprised that neither the Uchiha nor the Hyuga were their objectives. The Jounin seemed to recognize this fear when he lured Kakashi away, Shikaku chimed in. They must have realized it would have been more risky to chance stealing the genin than accomplishing their original mission. Which begs the question, the Sandaime chimed, what was their original mission? Silence was his response as the other two men thought it over. Danzo, I want you to set aside some time to look into this. If your investigation means that you have to set foot in IWA territory, I will permit it. I want you to turn up something before that Tsuchikage responds to my letter. As you wish, Hiruzen, he nodded. Shikaku, make sure that the scouting department knows that I am displeased with their performance. Ensure that they fix up any holes in their sweeps. Understood, sir. Good. I want this issue resolved before the Chunin exams are underway. You are dismissed. After both men had left the room, Hiruzen began to light his pipe. Iwa's activity was concerning, especially as the exams were coming up. Their attention was already going to be pulled away due to all of the incoming villages. The last thing he needed was IWA getting confident, when they were busy dealing with the logistical nightmare of the visiting traffic from other villages. He was about to return to his work, when the door burst open again. Naruto charged right in and gave him a mock salute when he reached his desk. How are you doing, Gigi? The old man shot him a fake glare. Not well, no thanks to you. I'm figuring out how best to deal with your mess. Ah, come on, you don't mean that. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. In all seriousness, I do have a long day of work ahead of me. Is there something you need? Yep, I'm ready to take the next test. Ah, so that was what this was about. He supposed this was an opportune time to do it. The boy had the next few days to himself, and he was sure the blonde would be too busy later, considering what Kakashi had in store for them. I see. Are you fully prepared? You know it. So what do you have planned for me this time? The Hokage chuckled. Very well. However, I'm not the one who has prepared your next test. I'm taking a page from an old project put forth by Yandaime. Naruto's eyes lit up as Sandaime pulled a scroll out from his desk. This was a test constructed by my predecessor for a class project he created. This was meant to act as a final exam for the intermediary course. It is timed, I'm afraid, so make sure that you will not be disturbed when you start it. The blonde excitedly nodded as he was handed the scroll. I think it goes without saying that you should refrain from cheating. Just what kind of guy do you take me for? Someone who takes great pleasure in breaking the rules and causing trouble, said a voice from the corner of the room. You shut your mouth, Kitsune Baka, the blonde shouted. There was snickering from the corners of the room, as the A and B watched the interaction between the boys. Sandaime cleared his throat, catching the attention of everyone present. As I was saying, I wish you the best of luck. Now I need to get back to work. You got it, GG. Thank you. And with that, the blonde stormed out of the office, just as quickly as he had come. 8 trigrams 64 palm guard. Hinata screamed as the training post was slashed apart by the sharp edges of chakra. Hayashi stood to the side of the courtyard as he watched Hinata's demonstration, and he had to admit he was impressed. Not many genin could claim that they had developed their own techniques. "Thank you, Hinata. Come here," he called out as she jogged up to him. She was slightly panting when she arrived. He could tell with his that the technique certainly ate up a large amount of her reserves. They would have to rectify this. "I will admit I am impressed by the technique. I assume you got the idea by watching Kaiten?" She quickly nodded, "Yes, sir, but I also got the idea from my mother's scrolls." It all clicked as the image of his wife bathed in a blue aura with thick, almost glass-like teal blades of chakra emanating from her palms popped into his mind. His wife had been as graceful as a swan when in public, but as ferocious as a tiger in the heat of battle. The comparison was especially appropriate considering her nickname. "Very good. I assume you are aware of which of her jutsu are outside of your current limits?" Another nod dissuaded his concerns. Although, this now made him curious. What other jutsu was his daughter trying to craft behind his back? "Very good. Before I return to my office, there are a few things I would like to discuss with you. The first regards we talked about earlier this morning." 2 hours earlier, the two of them had sat down as Hinata read to him the story of the rabbit goddess and all of her research into determining the identity of this individual. He had been astounded how many books and scrolls she had burned through in her quest. She had not made much progress in determining the identity of the individual, but she had crossed off several possibilities from the long line of Hyuga lineage. "For the time being, I would prefer it if you took a break from your research regarding the stone monument." She was surprised and started to protest, before he held up a hand. "Don't get me wrong. I am very impressed by the progress you have made, but you have other matters that will require your attention. Your priority should first and foremost be to the safety of your teammates. To do this, you need to focus on your training, so that you will be able to properly support them." After his message from the Hokage, Hayashi was sure Kakashi had his own plans regarding how they would be spending their time. It would inhibit her from reaching her true potential if she had to split her limited free time between training and researching, especially when it tended to yield little results. Hinata was surprised by her father's words. She had assumed he would be more concerned about the secrets of the clan than her teammates. It was a different side of her father that she was not used to seeing. "Do not be discouraged. I already have resources looking into this mystery, and I shall pass along your findings to them. You are no longer alone in this endeavor." Hinata was not shocked as her mind wandered to her conversation with the Nara leader a few days ago. "For now, try to put your mind at ease. We will deal with this problem as it comes up. If the past is any indication, our insight into this problem will only come in random bursts at a time. It would be better to focus on something that guarantees results." "Understood, sir." "Good. Now, let's see if your technique can actually guard against its namesake. I will slow myself down so you are able to keep up. Are you ready?" Hinata's face held a grim determination as she slipped into her form. "Ready." "Very good. Then let us commence." Chapter 14, Downtime, Part 2. Naruto sat down at his kitchen table and sprawled his sealing kit all around the scroll. He was anxious to get started. What really excited him was that he had no idea what to expect. The idea of taking a test actually devised by his idol was exhilarating. With bated breath, he opened the scroll and burned through the only visible section. Naruto groaned as he combed over the instructions. Sadly, it was a formal test. His gut turned as he gazed at the first paragraph, which read, "For this exam, you will be tested for your mastery of the intermediary level of. Should you pass this exam, you will be permitted to move forward to the advanced classes. This exam is split into 4 parts, a multiple choice, fill in the blank, a free response, and a puzzle seal for you to solve. You will have 2 hours and 30 minutes from the moment you begin the exam. After the allotted time, security seals in the scroll will activate, preventing you from answering any further. If these seals are tampered with in any way, the scroll will lock and you will instantly fail. Any marks entered after the allotted time will not be counted. After the allotted time, you shall receive instant feedback for your grade. To begin the test, place your hand on the area below this paragraph and insert your chakra. This will act as your signature for grading later on." I am proud of all of you for getting this far, and I wish you the best of luck. Even though he knew the message wasn't directed at him, Naruto still felt his heart skip a beat from the encouragement. He wiped away a single tear that threatened to fall from his eye, and forced himself to concentrate. It was time to get serious. Picking up his brush, he placed his hand over the scroll and began pumping chakra into the paper. Immediately the scroll's contents were revealed and a timer began counting down at the top of the page. It was time to begin. It was about midday as Sasuke strolled along the canals of the village. He never really liked having a lot of free time. Even though he had disliked being forced to sit through the monotony of the academy, he had hated their summer breaks even more. All it did was give him more time to think, and whenever he started thinking, his thoughts would inevitably return to his brother. So he would drown himself in training to block out his thoughts and feelings. He couldn't reflect on his past if he was too tired to think. However, now he couldn't even do that. He tugged at the uncomfortable bandages on his shoulder. The nurse had been kind and very thorough when she inspected his injury. She wanted him to pass her compliments to Hinata for how well she had treated him up until this point. The nurse had bathed his shoulder in a strange green chakra and a few minutes later, the injury was completely healed. Of course, that didn't stop her from wrapping him up in bandages to ensure that the newly formed tissue didn't tear. Something about it still being delicate. So now, he was left with nothing to do but simply walk and think. Desperately trying to avoid thoughts of his brother, he directed his train of thought to reflect on his last mission. All in all, he had to say that he was quite pleased with his overall performance. Sure, he hadn't been able to let loose too much, but he finally had a comparison for where he placed among the shinobi of other villages. For a fresh genin, he had done very well, but even that was not good enough. It would never be good enough compared to him. Catching himself again, he shook his head and directed his thoughts towards the conclusion of the mission. To call what they had done brutal would have been an understatement. The more empathetic part of him actually hoped that the Iwanin did not feel the full effects of their combined attacks. The back wind of heat alone had actually left small blisters along his body. He could only imagine the full pain that the man had to endure. He was still shocked how well the two of them worked together. Though the blonde sometimes made his blood boil, Sasuke could not deny that the two of them had chemistry. No, not like that, he thought embarrassingly to himself. Even from when they were little, the two of them were easily able to read each other's minds. He remembered a particular incident from when the two of them were about 6. Naruto, being the rambunctious prankster he was, had been placed in detention for covering one of the boys from a civilian family head to toe in glitter. Of course, the boy had it coming, for he had been pelting the blonde boy from 2 rows above with spitballs for the past week. This was an interesting occasion, for Naruto wasn't alone in his punishment. He was also sharing detention with Sasuke, who sat 2 seats away from him. This was back before the Uchiha incident. His brother had hyped up the academy as this amazing place, but it honestly did nothing but bore him. The day before, Sasuke had decided to skip school in an attempt to follow his brother around the village. Needless to say, his mother and the teacher had not been pleased. So they both had to sit out recess and snack time, and they could only stare at the other children as they got to play outside. Not that it mattered to Naruto, since no one ever wanted to play with him. Their stomachs grumbled as the 2 boys jealously glared at their classmates. Their teacher was sitting at his desk filing some paperwork, when one of his colleagues poked his head in. The man had given the 2 a short glare, promising a world of pain if they moved. He took his bento box and placed it up in the highest cubby before walking out of the door. As soon as they heard their footsteps disappear, the 2 sprung up as one and moved to the cubbies. Without a word, Sasuke crossed his hands and gave Naruto a boost as he desperately tried to reach for their teacher's box. Naruto stretched his tiny fingers, until he finally grasped the side of the container. His face lit up into his iconic smile as he clambered down, and the boys rummaged through the box. When the teacher returned, he was happy to find the 2 boys sitting upright in their seats as if they hadn't moved. He grabbed his bento box and was about to get back to work. He reached for the dango sticks he had been saving, but was surprised when he found them absent. He glared at the 2 boys who desperately tried to hide their guilt, but they could not remove the crumbs that littered the sides of their mouths. The 2 of them worked in tandem a little too well for how much they, at times, despised one another. It was like they had some unspoken connection or long past that enabled them to act in tandem without thinking. It was something that always bothered him about the blonde. No matter how much he sometimes pushed him away, they seemed to be linked together. As his thoughts returned to the battle, an offhand comment from the IWA shinobi made him pause. "Stop getting in my way, Uchiha. You can't stop me from getting the Yandame brat." What had he meant by that exactly? Sure, Naruto had in common with the Yandame, but he wouldn't call that enough to label him that way. This thought made him stop. Actually, how did the IWA shinobi even know he was good at? Before he started chasing them back towards Hinata's fight, Naruto had not even demonstrated that he was good with seals. Had they been spying on them? Maybe, but certainly not that man, he reasoned. The metal man had seized up and charged the blonde the instant he saw him. If he had been the one spying on him before, he would have jumped him then. What was it about Naruto that screamed a connection between him and Yandame? Sasuke stooped along the river and gazed up at the looming stone head of the man in question. He could kind of see a resemblance. They both certainly had spiky hair. From the few pictures he had seen of the man, he guessed they had similar hair color. Those were a few connections, but Sasuke scoffed as he thought of the more abundant differences. While he was sure some details were embellished, he reflected on how the villagers would describe their fallen hero. A man who was a genius above all others, but never flaunted it. Extremely humble and patient. A man who always kept a level head. Shit, Naruto muttered as he glanced at the clock. Sasuke scoffed as he thought of his teammate. The blonde was clever, but he was about as impatient as they come. So what could? "Hey, what are you doing down there?" Sasuke was cut out of his musings, and looked up to see a young girl staring down at him. She seemed to be around his age. He didn't recognize her from the academy, so he assumed she was a civilian. She had long black hair and black eyes that mirrored his own, except hers held a different emotion. She was carrying a bag of groceries in her hands, and held a distinct look of irritation as she glared at him. "You heard me, Baka. What are you doing down there? The adults around here don't want us walking next to the water." Sasuke scoffed and glared back at her. "Trust me. I'm fine. I'm the last person you need to worry about getting hurt." "Says the guy with his arm bandaged up," she shot back, "and who said I was worried about you getting hurt?" He clenched his teeth as he rebutted, "You seem to worry enough about me falling in." "It's not about falling in, dumbass. It's about the water moccasins that inhabit the area. Like that one right you're about to step on." Sure enough, Sasuke looked down and uncharacteristically let out a yelp as he jumped back from the black and yellow snake that sat coiled in front of him. She had giggled for a second before her eyes slightly widened as he flipped several feet in the air and landed close to her. "So you're a shinobi." "So what if I am?" he asked, noticing the disdain in her voice. "Nothing," she seemed to shrug. "So much for the ever-vigilant shinobi who are supposed to protect us. You guys can't even protect yourselves." Sasuke wanted to protest, but she did have him stuck here. It would have been disastrous if he had stepped on the serpent. If it had bitten him, he didn't know if he would have been able to make it back to the hospital in time. So he grit his teeth and mumbled something under his breath. "Didn't quite catch that," I said. "A little louder, duckbutt." He sent her a glare as he clenched out, "Thank you." She sent him a smirk. "Don't mention it. Well, I have to go, ninja boy. In case you didn't know, the world doesn't always revolve around you guys. I have a brother to feed. The name is Ria, by the way. What's yours, duckbutt?" He ignored her comment about his hair as he said, "Sasuke." "Pleasure. Well, goodbye, Sasuke. Try to keep yourself out of trouble." With that, she turned around and started to continue her way upriver as if they had never talked. Sasuke glared at her retreating form for a while before he turned his attention back to the black snake, which seemed to be staring right at him. It hissed at him, and he responded by using his good arm to chuck a kunai at it. It moved its head just out of the way before turning and heading into the water. Snakes always gave Sasuke chills. With one last glance before it dived back into the water, Sasuke tucked his hands in his pockets and began walking into the village. It was getting around to grab dinner. Naruto was sweating. He desperately tried to shut out each tick of the clock that counted down to his deadline. Shit! Everything had started out well enough. He had flashed through the first parts of the exam without a problem, no pun intended, but now he was surprised that he was actually being challenged by the puzzle seal. A required trait for all users was being able to discern the hidden code within each individual or set of kanji. Some seals operated on specific letters alone, while others required multiple letters to work in conjunction. Some even required lines of kanji that stretched out for several feet to achieve their intended purpose. Of course, this was very impractical for several cases, so a method was developed to reduce the size of these segments. Sprawling branches of kanji could be compacted into smaller and more manageable shapes and sizes. It was like condensing a paragraph into a single word or two. In fact, that had been one of the problems he had faced as he was unraveling the Horatian. Before he had been introduced to the idea, he had struggled to understand that the symbols of endurance, love, and sword each held their own sprawling library of code. Back to his test, revealing these branches wasn't the issue. Reading the damn thing was what truly plagued him. Naruto was struggling with a puzzle that was constantly contorting and shifting across the page. The ink seemed to have a life of its own as it sprung across the page and shifted into a variety of shapes. Whenever Naruto tried to enlarge a specific line of the seal's formula, it would be covered or contorted so that he could not read it. Yandere must have been a really sadistic bastard if he thought this was funny. He was fighting against the clock now, and he knew it. When the seal had started shifting, he had panicked and had been unable to regain his composure. As time continued to run out, he only panicked even harder. He had no idea what the seal did, let alone what he was supposed to do. There were no instructions when he reached this part. All there had been was a large black circle of ink that morphed into a decagon upon his touch. Each angle spat out a different line of code and began spinning clockwise. When he reached out to touch one, it branched out into numerous links that contorted into unreadable squiggles. It made his head spin. What was the yandere expecting him to do? He closed his eyes and clutched his face. This wasn't working. He needed to try something else. He was going to fail otherwise. He needed. A strange calm washed over him, as a word of advice seemed to creep into his mind. Whenever you find yourself facing a problem and under great stress, take a moment to step away. Take a deep breath, and look at the problem in a different way. Naruto let out a deep breath and closed his eyes. He finally started to slow down as he began to slowly inhale and exhale. I can do this. I just need to be calm. As his heartbeat settled down, his mind retraced his steps to the beginning. When he had reached this section, he had immediately pounced on the large blob in the center. It was at the forefront and designed to grab your attention. If activated, it would intentionally spiral out and try to confuse the reader. There was no way the yandere actually expected them to be able to read through this hot mess. It just wasn't possible. There had to be something else. He let out the breath he'd been holding and slammed his hands onto the scroll. He clenched his fingers as he twisted his hands counterclockwise. Immediately, the scroll began spinning in the opposite direction and began curling back into its original shape, until the singular, black circle returned to the page. Naruto leaned back as he studied the blot. He let his eyes wander the page, soaking in every detail until he noticed 4 black dots along the edge of the paper. Each of them was about the size of the tip of a pencil. He had totally missed them during his first attempt, and then it hit him. It was a message that had been drilled into his head by every book he had ever read about. Whenever faced with a new seal, always take your time to study it by parts and always work from the outside in. He pressed his fingers on the top 2 dots and spread them across the page, revealing a new line of code that did not twist like the others before it. He did the same to the bottom 2 and made a square made of kanji around the circle. He slowly read over the instructions and slapped himself in the head. It was so simple. Picking up his brush, he reactivated the circle, causing the branches to spread across the page, leaving an empty space right in the middle of the page. This time, the branches did not wiggle or contort on the paper. Instead, they drew straight lines to the corners of the square. Every branch contained the same question repeated over and over again. Smiling, he began writing his response in the center of the paper. The timer ticked down its final seconds as he finished his final stroke. It asked, "What is most important when tackling a new problem?" Naruto chuckled as he formed the hand signs to lace the kanji with chakra. He really had to thank Kitsune for his advice. In the middle of the page were only 2 kanji, which read Patience. The scroll glowed bright red as the timer stopped at 0. A second later, the whole scroll glowed white and Naruto could no longer see the page. A green light began descending from the tip of the scroll all the way towards the end. When it reached the bottom, the glowing light vanished, revealing green check marks next to all of his answers. He chuckled as he stared at a small lollipop that had appeared at the top of the page next to his grade. He picked it up and rolled it around in his hands before opening the wrapper. Time flowed differently for things in seals. It could be designed to be dramatically faster, but usually time crept almost to a halt inside of seals. The piece of candy had been sitting there for who knows how many years, but it was probably in the same condition the yandere bought it in. Naruto popped the candy in his mouth and couldn't suppress the warm feeling of giddiness that spread across his chest. He had passed with flying colors. The next few days seemed to fly by, and before they knew it, the members of Team 7 found themselves walking together towards their training grounds. Naruto had been sure to boast that he had officially moved on to the advanced material. Hinata happily applauded his accomplishment, while Sasuke simply told him good job. They were shocked when they found their sensei leaning against the side of the bridge, with his book suspiciously absent. "Why, you're actually on time," Naruto stuttered. Yes, I suppose I am." "What's going on, sensei?" Hinata asked cautiously. He sighed as he gazed over the three of them. "I would like to offer you all an apology." He could literally see the confusion etch itself on their faces. "I will admit that my behavior has been a little lax when it comes to your training, and for that I apologize. Despite that, you three were able to overcome a major obstacle all on your own, and for that you should be commended." They were quickly cut off from smiling when he said, "Don't let that go to your head. In fact, even though you repelled those, you all would be dead if I hadn't shown to deal with their jounin leader. Whether I like it or not, you three are going to be facing some big challenges in your futures, and you will need to be ready for them. So, I had a conversation with the Hokage." They each stared at him in curiosity. "For the next month, you three are mine. We will not be going on any missions for the time being." Naruto began cheering and jumping up and down before Kakashi cut him off. "This does not mean things are going to be easy for you. In case you didn't know, I was the captain of ANBU for a reason. For the next month, I am going to train you until your knuckles bleed, your insides will burn, and you will feel as if you are going to collapse. You do what I tell you to do, and only leave when I tell you to leave. If you manage to succeed in the goals I put out for you, Hokage-sama will assign us several C-rank missions to make up for the D ranks we will have missed, and that is not all." Sasuke had been shocked. This was exactly what he had hoped for, but apparently there was more. "In case you didn't know, the exams are coming up relatively soon. If we are to do this, the Hokage doesn't just expect you three to enter, he expects you to pass. He is breaking protocol here by allowing us to do this, so he expects results. Now are you three up to it?" Sasuke grinned as he looked between his teammates. Naruto shared his grin, and Hinata had a look of grim determination. "Do you even need to ask?" Naruto asked. "Good. Now then." Kakashi rushed forward faster than they could blink and drove his fist into Naruto's gut. His eyes bulged out of his head as he was flung several feet away. Kakashi stared down at the faces of his shocked students and said, "Training begins now." Chapter 15: Gluttons for Pain. Sasuke could only blink before Kakashi backhanded him. The metal plates of his gloves caused blood to spill from Sasuke's nose. He backed away, gasping in pain, as Kakashi whipped a kick at Hinata. Having more time than her teammates, she was able to duck under the blow. Veins bulged around her eyes as she leapt toward the man with her hands bathed in blue chakra. She was shocked when he caught her wrists and spun her in a circle, before flinging her into her blonde teammate, who was still struggling to get up. They crashed into each other with a satisfying thud, and Kakashi rounded on Sasuke, who was still clutching his nose. Sasuke opened one clenched eye to see a fist rocketing towards his face. All he could do was brace himself as the punch sent him flying back. Dirt was torn up as he rolled away from the jounin. Sasuke clutched his aching face in his hands as he angrily glared at his sensei. Hinata was holding her hip as she tried to help up her teammate, who was trying to regain his breath. "Like I told you, for the next month, I am going to drag you all through hell and back. If you manage to survive, you might learn a thing or two. Now come at me. Hinata was shivering. Gone was the jovial Kakashi that they had grown to know during training. This was the stone-cold assassin she had glimpsed when he drove his hand through the Jounin's chest. Naruto was finally able to stand on his own and was glaring daggers at their sensei. Oh, he was going to get it for that cheap shot. He and Sasuke shared a glance and raced towards the man. It was a storm of fists and kicks as they assaulted him. One would attack from below, as the other would move in at the man's chest. He barely seemed to move as the two genin bounced around the man. No matter what they did, there was an arm or knee to block their attacks. All of his moves were precise, thought out, and delivered with the power of a piston. Kakashi blocked simultaneous kicks from the boys on both sides as felt a presence behind him. He grabbed Naruto's leg and swung him into Sasuke, before diving out of the way of Hinata's strike. The two were sent flying away as Hinata engaged the man. She was growing more and more frustrated as he just seemed to dance out of the way of all her strikes. With her, she could see Sasuke push the blonde off him and begin to form his chakra. She continued a few strikes before replacing herself with a block of wood as he screamed, "Katan, Fireball Jutsu!" A raging ball of fire raced towards the Jounin, engulfing the spot he had occupied. Sasuke stared at the burning fire for a second before scanning the surrounding tree line. Where did he go? Kakashi appeared out of nowhere and delivered a roundhouse kick to the boy's side. As Sasuke tumbled out of the way, Kakashi noticed a shadow growing beneath him and heard Naruto scream as he fell from above with a kunai in hand. Without looking, he threw a kunai of his own at the clone faster than it could see, causing it to disappear in a puff of smoke. Without breaking a sweat, Kakashi plunged his hand into the earth below him and yanked up a sputtering Naruto by the throat. Never pull the same trick on an opponent you have already faced, Kakashi chided as tightened his grip. Yeah, I know, he tried to sputter. There was a loud pop as the kunai the destroyed clone had been holding transformed and raced toward Kakashi with a piece of paper in his hand. In the blink of an eye, Kakashi swiped the paper out of the clone's hand, smacked it onto the original's forehead, and proceeded to drive a kunai through the skull of the shocked clone. Kakashi relinquished his grasp of Naruto and raised one hand in a seal. He quietly murmured, "Activate," causing the real Naruto to plummet into the ground, leaving a small crater. God damn it! He muttered through clenched teeth as he struggled to move. Remember not to let your opponents use your own moves against you. Kakashi whipped around and grabbed the wrist of his female student, who had been silently creeping up on him. He continued her forward motion and directed her hand toward the ground. He plunged her glowing hand into the thigh of her blonde teammate, who cried out in pain as his thigh started cramping and his was forcibly closed. She began to scream, but was caught off as Kakashi wrapped her arm uncomfortably behind her back. She gasped in pain as he tightened his grip. The same goes for you too, Hinata. Be wary of taijutsu users who will aim to redirect your attacks. Hinata winced from his grip and tried to turn her head to face the man. She stopped when she saw something that made her eyes widen. Instantly, the veins receded from her face and she squeezed her eyes shut. A second later, a kunai harmlessly sailed over her head, right in front of the Jounin's face. He was able to glance at it and notice a small ball tied to the handle just in time. Flash bang, Kakashi thought before it lit up. He let go of Hinata as Sasuke raced towards him to take advantage of his momentary blindness. Good. They know not to let up. Each one has been attacking me, one after the other, in an attempt to capitalize on my divided attention. They know they are outmatched, so they are resorting to trying to trick me when I'm distracted. Even with his vision impaired, Kakashi and Sasuke began a one-sided taijutsu bout as Hinata stumbled up to Naruto. Her eyes had been closed, but that flashbang had still gone off very close to her. She rubbed her eyes as she tried to talk to her crush. Naruto-kun, how do I undo the gravity seal? He grunted as he tried to turn his head to her. Normally, you just form the release sign, but mine are more complicated than that. I designed them so only my chakra could release them. Either I need to form the release sign or I need to force my chakra through the seal. You could try to rip it off, but I'd like to keep the skin on my face. Right now, I'm so weighed down I can't move my arms. She shook off the blush that threatened to spread across her face as she reached out for his hands. If she could get his fingers into the proper hand sign, he could release the seal. She lightly tugged on his arms, but was now pulling as hard as she could to lift his hand. It wouldn't budge. How strong did you make this thing? About 6 times Earth's gravity, he muttered, avoiding eye contact. All right, she needed a new plan. Hinata once again activated her and knelt beside him. She placed 2 fingers along his back, just above his heart. What are you doing? I am trying to direct the flow of chakra from your heart to your forehead by nudging it along with my own chakra. Please be quiet, I need to focus on carefully maneuvering the chakra out your aorta and through your chakra system. If I move too much, my chakra might cut into your veins. Focus on the area under the seal, and prepare for my signal. Even through his stiff pain, he was surprised. This was the Hinata he knew when she went into what he called her doctor mode. Gone was the shy and timid girl, and in came the composed, no-nonsense, semi-professional. She began gently tracing her fingers up his back as she directed the flow of his chakra. Despite the dire situation they were in, he was getting ticklish and tried his best not to squirm. It was odd to say the least as she ran her fingers up and down his back following the chakra flow, and he could help but blush from her touch. She traced her delicate fingers up his neck and along his cheek until finally she said, "Now?" He was blushing up a storm as he squinted his eyes and forced his chakra into the tag. The paper glowed blue before it peeled off his face and fluttered to the ground. Thank you, he stuttered as he tried to get up. He gasped in pain and collapsed as he held his leg. Would you mind? Of course, she smiled as she lightly jabbed in his leg. The built-up pressure dissipated as her foreign chakra was removed from his system. They began to smile at one another as Sasuke landed in a heap right next to them. Sasuke-kun! Team! They each grabbed an arm and started to help the panting boy to his feet. He was covered in scratches and marks they could tell would form into nasty bruises. They all began to glare at their sensei, who was casually strolling up to them. This is just to warm up my adorable little genin. For the next month, I am going to be beating you all into the ground, so you better get used to this. Come now, no need for frowns. Guess what? Considering what I have in store, Hinata will soon be able to patch you all up in no time. We'll have our own little medic who can heal you up, just so we can start all over again. Doesn't that sound fun? The genin were trembling as their dooms slowly marched towards them. They couldn't tell if his eye smile was genuine or not. Was he doing it to mess with them, or did he really get a kick out of this? He leaned over them and said, "Let's get to work." 2 training fields over, Teammate was having a much more tranquil training session. Kiba and Shino were sitting in the shade as Akamaru cheered on Sakura, who was sparring with Kurenai. Her breath came out in heavy pants and her whole body was drenched in sweat, but she pushed her exhaustion to the side as she lunged at the older woman. The fresh jounin simply weaved out the way of her punches and landed light taps along her body. Finally, she held up her hand and said, "Stop. That is enough for now." Sakura had her hands on her knees as she smiled up at her role model. You have come a long way, Sakura. I'm very proud of your improvement. Thank you, Sensei, the younger girl beamed. Kurenai couldn't have been more proud as she stared down at her pupil. There had been some problems early on, but she had made sure to stamp those out quickly. The girl was fiercely intelligent and had the most superb chakra control she had ever seen in a genin. While this was due to her smaller than average chakra reserves, it was far easier to increase one's reserves than mastering control. The girl had simply flourished under the attention of a female mentor. In a world of predominantly male shinobi, it was rare to find a female role model amongst the ranks of their forces. There were always the tales of the legendary Tsunade, but stories could only go so far. Some people needed that model person in their life to guide them along their path of becoming a better person. Kurenai was more than a little humbled when the girl had shown up in attire similar to hers. Instead of her red sleeve, it was pink to match her hair. It was like getting to train her own little protege, but not quite to the extent that guy had gone with his student. Sakura had burned through the genjutsu material Kurenai had set out for her in a heartbeat, and was already moving on to develop her own. Oh, Sakura was her pride and joy, but that didn't mean she wasn't also proud of her other students as well. Kiba's skill in taijutsu was nothing to laugh at, but that was not the main reason she was proud of him. Kiba could be rash and hot-headed, but his personality is what brought the team together. His partner techniques and pack mentality really helped unify the three of them. Of course, Sakura was always there to keep him in line whenever he went too far. A quick bop in the head and he was whimpering like a dog with his tail between his legs. Shino, on the other hand, was quiet and calculative. He would stay out of most of their conversations, and only chime in to propose an outside view of the situation. His analytical mind helped rein in Kiba's impulsiveness and gain points with Sakura. She had originally been put off by the bug user's techniques, but that had been stamped away after her long talk with Kurenai regarding her future as a kunoichi. That was her purpose, the middle ground. She could sometimes be as hot-headed and passionate as Kiba, but also able to take a step back and look at a situation calmly like Shino. Kurenai smiled as she looked over at the boys. You better look out for Kiba. Pretty soon she'll be dropping you in an all-out spar. Yeah right, Kiba scoffed, as if she could actually lay a scratch on me. I don't care how much better she's gotten, no little girl. He felt a large amount of killing intent, and yelped as he stared at the dark figure looming above him. A dark silhouette of his teammates stared down at him. Oh, what's wrong with being a girl? The dark figure boomed as it cracked its knuckles. And nothing, Sakura-chan, I just meant. Oh, I know what you meant. I'm not just very happy about it. See, come on, Sakura-chan, he stuttered as he backed into a tree. Is all this genjutsu really necessary? The dark figure loomed above him with glowing yellow eyes. Pink hair cascaded and whipped around her as a white smile lit up her face. Yes, I think it is. Really brings out the fear in your eyes. Besides, all you're seeing is what you think of me. Are you saying you're really afraid of some helpless little girl? Kiba whimpered as he braced himself for the impending beatdown. Shino shook his head as he watched the antics of his teammates. Kiba just couldn't keep his big mouth shut. You would think being on a team with a female jounin would beat out that kind of mindset. It still impressed him how Sakura seemed to be able to create genjutsu without even realizing it. Kurenai found out one day as Sakura went off on Kiba for something stupid he did. She was glaring at him while flames seemed to flare up behind her and a dark figure loomed over her head. Kurenai was surprised until Shino told her she had been doing this for years. Her class had just grown accustomed to it, unless it was directed at them. Kurenai's eyes had been as wide as stars as she excitedly raced up the girl. It was fantastic. To create genjutsu without needing hand signs or even on purpose created so many possibilities. Kurenai massaged her forehead as she listened to Kiba's cries of pain. He just couldn't keep a lid on it. I don't think he's ever going to learn, she said as she turned to Shino. Probably not. If he was going to change, he probably would have learned after the third beating. She sighed as they stared at their antics. All in all, she was very pleased with their progress. They had even gone off on their first C-rank mission. They had gone out to an outpost to pick up some reports, when they had stumbled across a whole encampment of bandits. They had responded perfectly, and they were able to subdue the bandits without a scratch. However, this was nothing compared to the trouble the other rookie teams had gotten into. Although she had originally been impressed by Asuma's story of the Kumo missing Nin, Kakashi's story blew theirs out of the water. Of course it would be Team 7 to turn a D rank into an A rank. Well, it was only an A rank due to the presence of the jounin. Even so, Kakashi's kids had been remarkable. Dealing with 2 IWA chunins all by themselves. Their accomplishments made her excited. Maybe it was a little immature, but the 3 jounin were very competitive, and she wanted to see how well her kids stacked up against the other teams. She would have the perfect chance too. If they kept progressing the way they had, she was confident they would be ready for the exams. Kiba would need to work on his impulsiveness, but she was pretty confident in Shino and Sakura's abilities. She knew Asuma, and he was probably just as lax in teaching as Kakashi was. She couldn't help but feel a little smug if they were able to wipe the floor with their old classmates. It would certainly make her feel smug to wipe the grin off of Anko's face. While she was her best friend, she could be a bit overwhelming at times. For whatever reason, she was rooting for Kakashi's group of kids over hers. Just because she was sleeping with the guy didn't mean she had to side with him on everything. She had been adamant that they could, in her own words, curb stomp your cute little maggots into oblivion. This only motivated Kurenai further to make sure her kids went above and beyond Kakashi's students. She knew the man, and there was no way he was pushing them any harder than he had to. Again. Kakashi ordered. All 3 were panting as they stared up at the trees in front of them. They took a deep breath and all three of them rushed up the side of the tree. Sasuke and Naruto were able to make it up about 8 or 9 steps before they lost control. Hinata once again made it all the way up the tree and ran back down. She had already been taught this exercise years ago to help bolster her chakra control. There was a style that required expert control of one's own chakra, and young Hyuga were drilled with these exercises from the moment they began training. The two boys grunted as they landed on their feet, while Hinata ran down the tree. Kakashi gave them a moment to catch their breath as he stared at them. Hinata had this down. He was now just making her do this to increase her reserves. Based on the techniques she had created, she would need a much larger chakra system in order to cope with their drawbacks. After that initial beatdown, he decided to take it a little more slowly. He was going to ease them into his planned schedule, but that initial spar would serve to show that he could change their pace at any time. Very good, Hinata. You'll be moving on to the next step as these two keep working on this. Both of the boys were frustrated as they glared up at the trees. They had yet to find the right balance, and it was continuously throwing them off. With every failed attempt they would just grow angrier, causing them to fail over and over. Hi, Sensei, Hinata panted, what is the next step? I'll demonstrate. You too. Pay attention to this. After you are done here, you will be moving on to this as well. Kakashi began going through hand signs before slamming his hands in the ground. Doton, moving earth core. A square in the dirt formed in front of him, and it began to sink into the ground. He kept the jutsu going until there was a 40-square-foot hole in front. The others stared at the cube in the ground as Kakashi began running though more seals. Sushin, waterfall cascade. A large stream of water erupted from his mask and began to fill the hole. As the water level became even with the ground, he cut off the jutsu. This is the next step, calmly said as he strolled out onto the surface of the water. They could only stare in awe as their sensei shattered their view of the world. When he turned back to them, he couldn't help but chuckle. Oh, they were just so precious. After you master tree walking, you can move on to water walking. I will go into detail of the technique with you boys after you have completed the first step, he said as he rejoined them at the pond's edge. For now, you keep going at it until you have mastered it. You will not be moving on until I see fit. Now get back to it. Newly invigorated, the two boys raced off towards the tree as they tried their next attempt. Hinata, Kakashi called, drawing her attention away from the boys. I don't expect this to be too much trouble for you, but I expect you to apply yourself just as hard as they are. Yes, sir. Now, before we get started, I might want to recommend refraining from wearing white clothes over the next few days. I know you like your jacket, and it is pretty heavy, but I don't think we need to give the boys any more ideas than necessary. Hinata was burning as red as a tomato, and Kakashi could swear he saw steam coming out of her ears. Kakashi-sensei. She whined as she tried to hide away into her jacket. He chuckled as he patted her head. I'm only teasing, but it wouldn't hurt to bring a towel to training either. She nodded her head as Naruto rang out, Hey, how come you are being so nice to her? Because she is actually doing a good job. Besides, Hinata-chan is my favorite. Kakashi eye smiles at the boy. Her face actually seemed to glow as she tried to bury herself deeper into her jacket. You're just saying that to mean Kakashi team, Naruto pouted as a shuriken sailed next to his face. Language Naruto. In fact, there was a reason Kakashi was going lighter on the girl. It was not because she was weaker. Well, not physically anyway. From what he had heard, negative reinforcement was not going to work on her as it might her teammates. They thrived in the face of a challenge. If the boys were told they couldn't do something, they would throw themselves at it until they had either accomplished it, or they died trying. Her own clan had pushed her down for so many years, and all that did was drive her into her shell. She needed to be handled carefully. He couldn't let up on her too much, but she had to know that he thought she was doing a good job. A little praise could go a long way for someone deprived of it. Too much pressure, and he could just make matters worse. Now, are you ready to get started? Why, yes, sir, she nodded as her face calmed down. Now the trick is to change the flow of your chakra with the flow of the water. Sasuke growled as he made another mark on the tree. This latest attempt was even further down than this last. He just couldn't get it. He glared daggers at the tree as he landed on his feet. What was it he was doing wrong? He could understand why Hinata could do it, but why was he having such a hard time? The dove had been slowly creeping up on him and had passed his furthest point a while ago. He wasn't that far ahead, but it still irritated him to be overtaken by the blonde idiot. He sighed as he sat down to catch his breath. He shot a glare at Kakashi, who was off to the side working on a scroll. His orange book had been suspiciously absent, and it was strange to see him without his nose buried in pages of smut. He was apparently writing out his plans for them over the next few weeks. Naruto landed with a thud next to him and immediately fell on his back. He was panting heavily and frowned as he stared up at the tree. He was getting better, but he still felt like he was doing something wrong. He groaned as he sat up and stared out at the water. Hinata was standing in the middle of the pond with her eyes closed in deep concentration. Learning to stand on the water had been the easy part. Keeping her concentration and while moving forward was what eluded her grasp. He blushed when he realized her jacket had been tossed to the side long ago, for it was soaked and weighing her down. She stood in her mesh jacket as water dripped down her face from her hair due to her last attempt. It had been a long time since he had seen her without her jacket, and he had forgotten how slender she was. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath to clear her mind. She stretched her senses out and let her chakra mingle with the water. Though it appeared calm, she could feel the tiny ripples of its movements as it bounced against the shore. She let it up and down movement flow over her as she tentatively took a step forward. She maintained the rhythm of the water in her mind as she brought her foot down. There was a slight dip, but she adjusted her footing and took another step. Then another. And another. She was wobbling her way across the water and smiled. She was starting to get it. She opened her eyes to see the two boys staring at her, and a blush began creeping up her face. This tiny distraction was all that was needed to break her concentration, and she fell into the cold water. She shivered as swam up to shore and pulled herself out of the water. She desperately tried to avoid eye contact with the boys. Both were blushing as they tried to ignore her, wiping herself off with her jacket. Boys. Eyes front and center, Kakashi called out, Hinata, very good job. Within a day or two, I'm sure you'll have it down. Take a break for now. The two boys' heads turned around so fast, she was worried they were going to have whiplash. She blushed and called out thank you, as she approached them and sat in the middle. Sasuke, is your nose feeling better? She asked. Still hurts, but thank you for writing it. Kakashi's backhand earlier had nearly broken his nose. Kakashi had felt a little bad for that. He had made sure it was fully broken after they had their one-on-one bout, while Hinata helped Naruto out of his own seal. How are you two doing? Not as well as you, Naruto mumbled. I just can't seem to get it. Every time I fail, I just get more frustrated. Although Sasuke remained silent, his thoughts were the same as Naruto's. Well, maybe that is the problem. They both stared at her as she got up and headed to the tree. What I was told to do was empty your mind as you attempted it. If you are upset or your mind is clouded, it can disrupt your chakra flow, causing you to fall. Why is that? Naruto asked as his face scrunched up. Because chakra isn't just some neutral energy source. It responds to our emotions. If we are angry or upset, chakra takes on those characteristics. It will flow wildly and leak from your system. This is what makes it harder to control. If you're calm, it will flow smoothly like water, making it much easier. Naruto smiled as he jumped to his feet. All right. Let's try it. He closed his eyes and began taking deep breaths. He stopped smiling, and she noticed he was going into the same frame of mind he went into when he was working on seals. He pushed away his thoughts of irritation and instead focused on the basic kanji 4. Let go of your anger. Let go of your tension. His eyes snapped open and he raced towards the tree. As he raced up, his heart pounded as he neared his previous record, and he was delighted as he flew past it and kept on going. He went about 8 more steps and started getting excited before he began to overload the chakra in his feet and he slipped from the bark. He slashed the tree as he fell back towards the ground. The landed with a thud and slipped onto his back. Although it had hurt, he was ecstatic. Her advice had worked. As Hinata raced over to check that he was all right, he enveloped her in a big hug and started spinning her around. He seemed to have no problems as the drenched girl soaked his clothes. Thank you? Thank you? Thank you? You're the best, Hinata-chan. Her eyes rolled into the back of her head as she became limp in his grasp. Sasuke stared at them as he fumed over her comments. Of course. It was so simple. It infuriated him, he hadn't thought of it before. The same train of thought applied to anything. The angrier you were, the harder it was to concentrate. The more analytical side of his mind was intrigued that it would apply to chakra as well. As he thought this over, a new thought burst into his head. Is that why he had said that? Was that his goal? He was instantly transported back to that night, as his brother stood on the fresh corpses of his mother and father. That night was forever burned into his memory. His brother had made sure of that. If you want to kill me, curse me, hate me, and live a long, unsightly life. Was that why he had done it? So when they had their inevitable face-off, Sasuke would be so blinded by rage that his chakra and mind would be off balance. Had he really thought that far ahead? He clenched his fist as he stared up at the tree. I will not let my brother control my destiny anymore. He took a deep breath and thought of clouds to calm himself. His eyes shot open and he raced towards the tree full tilt. He soared past his previous mark and made several steps before the image of his brother's face came back into his mind. His concentration shattered and his chakra slipped from the tree trunk. He began falling and slammed his kunai into the bark to slow his descent. He jumped off and rolled to his feet before he stared at the tree. He had certainly surpassed his previous record, but it was nowhere good enough. So they are finally starting to get it, Kakashi mused. His teammates offered their words of encouragement, but Sasuke ignored them as he faced his latest problem. This was something that would directly affect his final battle with his brother, and could potentially save him on the road to reach him. He needed to find a way to calm himself. As he thought this over, a new problem surprised him. What put him at ease? What were things that he actually liked to do? Thanks for watching, Shinobi Squad. If you enjoyed this what if, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next twist. Drop your theories in the comments, I'm always reading. Want more Naruto heat? Check out the other videos on the channel. Stay sharp, stay awesome, and remember even shadow clones need love. Peace out.